Advancing towards holes is not an easy situation. The only real defense the cav has, it could run away or it can start charging the infantry. So I did the latter, threw somebody into square. That's not going to do a whole hell of a lot. But I got a target that I could strike. It's going to be hard for me to hit another one just because they're kind of behind me. So I'm going to have to reposition a little bit. And other than that, this is, pre-movement. I moved Nappy because he's so far away. I also did a couple of cav charges against the Cossacks to try to get them away because things are looking pretty shaky over here. One of them, his best move was to just blow himself. If you can do it. The other got caught and slammed. Not worrying about these guys. They have a 50-50 chance of charging or whatever, but having them right inside, my wheelhouse, that's bad. Now, this was something I was thinking about that I didn't really discuss, but those Cossacks have about as hard a time charging disordered or even routing units as they do against formed units, which I can kind of see why they wouldn't want to hit, and certainly against other cav. In fact, the thing that they pay the least price for, I guess, is they don't pay any movement point cost on their own turn if they fail a countercharge, whereas if they fail an actual charge, they're frozen in place. This guy's marked. He's got a problem. I don't remember what the rules are on that. He is not going to be facing an enemy. I don't remember if that actually blows the cav. I think it just removes the charge marker. You could disorganize if you want to. Okay. Movement after that. Poniatowski's holding his position. He is where he needs to be. Victor shifting some troops to try to fill in the gap between him and Lauriston. Lauriston trying to make some kind of sense out of what's left of his formation. He's still got, he added another artillery, but he's still got a nice little battery up here, or whatever. Pujol turns to face the Austrians. Auguero moves to get himself into the defensive position that I envisioned for him with those orders. It's not quite what I wanted, but it's what happened. It's also not quite how they're written. Like, I intended for this to be part of Galgenberg if he's defending it, so that he could kind of anchor the flank a little bit. And Kellerman slowly parading across the back of the field. I may need him to try to chase those Austrians. If anybody is marching on the field, they're kind of targets for cav. So getting a little bit heavier cav up into play, well, no, those are mainly lights too. In fact, they're all lights. Yeah, it should be more helpful, but I don't know. My best cav is my guard, and not here yet. All right. I would think playing down here, like it was in my other room when I played games there, would be relatively easy. I have to say, there's a number of steps I have to take, and it makes it harder to, I wanted to just walk away from the table like I often do. And yeah, coming down the stairs is often a disincentive. But here, I've got to walk around the big table, turn on a couple of lights, get the light over there. I have to switch my glasses. Just so many little things that it's like, yeah, I better not take a break. But it also means that, you know, while it's a disincentive to me taking a break, it's also a disincentive to me actually starting to play in any given moment. During the day, it's a little easier. Well, glasses are the only thing. And let's see, Victor took a bit of a hammering over here. Some troops heading out of there. The Cav charges, one of them sent the Cossacks fleeing. The other one was successful and sent some infantry routing. But it also put me in kind of a bad position, sitting next to a square with a lot of enemies around me. So I blew the Cav. It's still not in a great place, and that could well rout after fighting. And what else? This guy. I don't know what he was up to, why he has a marker on him. But he's not charging anymore, whatever he was doing. Oh, he was the one that scared off the other Cossack, yeah. So, flipping over to the coalition side of the turn, it's definitely harder to do at night, even with the fancy glasses and a reasonable amount of light. Well, an unreasonably small amount of light. This is, I've delayed it so long. I thought I could play it upstairs where light would be more even and the same day or night pretty much. But yeah, it didn't work there. And doing something like this down here with the big window I have, I probably should be doing something like this during the summer. This is a summer game. The problem is during the winter is when I've tended to play the big games, especially since during the summer, if it gets hot, I end up all sweaty and dripping on the map, and that's not good either. The Austrian movement in the 10:30 turn, I moved Clenau. He's trying to inch his way around it. High cost of movement points. This Universitats holes. But there's a couple of units that are routed, and they raise an interesting question in my head, which is, this is several days of battle. Now, I handled routing in Hanau, so that units came back after a day. That may be a little optimistic, but I think that's what I'm going to do here as well. Unless the army has become demoralized, or is demoralized at the time of the rout, I'm going to have units capable of coming back. Whether or not they can do it after an army rout, I'm not sure. Because in one of the scenarios, not the grand campaign. So this is kind of interesting. I didn't explain this, and maybe it's in the errata. But the grand campaign scenario victory conditions are, both sides have the same goal, destroy the enemy army. Boom. This is not anything to do with that. Yeah, what? If we take a look at, think Battle of Leipzig. If the army of Bohemia is destroyed on the 16th, this will be a French victory, but you can keep playing. If it's not destroyed, then whoever controls the city on the evening of the 18th wins the game. I feel like they're using destroyed as demoralized. And again, you know, not first language, whatever. There may be, but I suspect it's got more to do because the author speaks English reasonably well, very well actually, and I would not in any sense think that that concept is confused, and it's also different meaning in French as well, so it's not like, you know, it's a weird concept in the language that isn't carrying over properly. So my feeling is that it's probably just sloppiness, as with much of the roles. and with a, yeah, you'll know what you're talking about or whatever. But there's no rules in the game, in the basic series, whatever, that talk about destroying armies, as far as I know. This is like a new concept brought in. And it's kind of disturbing because I don't know if in the original, we can check that. But when we look at the army morale, there's two things, demoralization and desperation morale for armies. I don't know if they both go back this far, which, you know, if they do, it's going to disturb me because yeah, so this only has one level of demoralization, and it's got a -2 to the check. I think is what demoralization has here. Route's an optional rule. God. The modularization and design your own game, basically parts of it, definitely cause issues with the rules. No, so demoralization is the piece that's been taken away, essentially. Rather than the desperation was present in the old rules. They basically didn't include any rules for demoralization. And I might try to figure out what those numbers might be at some point. Because I do kind of like that rule. Hey, the Army's taken enough of a beating that it needs to pull out. Yeah, it really isn't, it's no longer functioning as well, but it's not really routed. You know, it's not really, as they would put it, destroyed. Anyway, I can see making I can see not, I can see how the older rules can be taken as destroyed, as opposed, because they're talking about it as army route, etc., as opposed to what's covered in the demoralization and desperation. Anyhow, I would make it, yeah, it would have to be the destroyed, the desperation morale level, whatever these points are here, and if I figure out something else, that's not going to affect whether routing units can return. But the other aspect is really kind of you need to get out of here. You can't hold the ground anymore. But there was something there was a reason I picked up the camera and started chatting at this point in kind of the midst of a turn. I'm trying to, of my movement, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell that was, but I lost my choo-choo. Oh yeah, no, it was about the routing units. Okay, so I did cover that. Because I do think I want to give them a chance to come back, given the amount of time present in the game to recover, and, you know, whatever. I'm also a little iffy about, like, well, you know, see, this is one of the things with the game. If one unit in your command moves more than half its movement points, your command is not resting for fatigue. And that's kind of problematic. You could have a well-rested unit. You could decide not to bring your remaining units forward quickly, you know, and wait until they move with the other units. But that feels a little wrong somehow. But it's a lot of the abstractions in this system feel a little like they're not really giving you a good story or a solid and believable story. They're pushing things just a little too far. And if I think something as detailed as this, yeah, it's not, you know, it's not the NBS system, but if I think something as detailed as this is already going too far in the abstractions, just think how why anything with design for effect, you know, as a major part of the system is going to really kind of grate on me in terms of I don't see the story anymore. You know, this, I'm getting a detailed, blown-in view of the story, but some liberties have been taken so to make the job a little easier and to make the game playable. A whole lot of movement here in terms of the combat. You know, there might have been a couple of disorders coming from it. More rallying, to tell you the truth, with all those kings running around trying to help, and then some failed attempts. But the funniest thing was Schwarzenberg went and tried to rally Wittgenstein. Because, you know, the markers look the same, and I'm like, oh, a 1, I can rally a 1. What's that doing here? I didn't think too hard, because there weren't a lot of 1s, and I think I rallied all of them, but 2s and whatnot are higher. So that gets us to the end of 10 a.m. and gets us over to 11. With the line kind of stable, both sides taking weaknesses, you know, a little shaky, whatever. Neither side's really falling apart completely, but the center here has collapsed to some extent, but the right, well, really between Victor and, no, I can't, Poniatowski. It kept coming up with like Pulaski and stuff like that. Other, not all that much earlier Polish leaders. We've got this weird situation here. It's really hard to face Cav. It is really hard to face Cav. I unlimbered some guns to make it a little more expensive if they want to really interfere with me. But, you know, I'm leaving stragglers behind. The Cav can go mop them up if they decide to stop pushing me. I can't just march up against them. That's a really slow process. You form up into square. You form into square and come close. Although actually I can march pretty close and then form into square at like 2 hexes, but then I can't shoot them. In order to shoot them or scare them away, I have to be in square slowly moving forward. And I don't have quite as much cav. I also don't have as heavy a cav. Who is this? Oh, Pujol, yeah. I was thinking it was Sebastiani, but he's not on yet. Okay, so that is the end of this turn. I don't think I'm going to be coming back for another turn tonight. I have enough gas in the tank that I could easily do one, but this is, especially at night, a difficult proposition. It really is. It's, yeah. 11 o'clock turn starts, because tonight is Friday, and I go dancing on Fridays, and take a nap in the middle of the day and stuff like that. I am without my good old wood stove on this one, for whatever that means. It means less noise. It also means I can't keep the house close to comfortable. These electric heaters aren't enough. Anyway, I'll get over there where I've started the cav charges, and I think I'm done with them. But Marmont shows up on the board at this point, and I'm bringing him in as a kind of denser column than I usually do, which will get him there quicker. It also means I need to move the pieces less often. They're all in stacking restrictions. There's no special road stacking restrictions. That's the kind of detail that this game leaves out. Which is why I usually spread them out is, hey, they probably can't go at full density down the road. But I'm not worrying about it here just because. There's Napoleon making his way slowly onto the field. And then, excuse me, over here, I launched a couple of cav charges. One, I don't even know whose these are. which is fine. They were in command when they started, but they charged towards that artillery. The infantry formed a square, and I'm like, okay, blow that. But another one here with no protecting infantry, where I'm going to be able to get at the artillery. I don't think I want to do any charges against these Austrians during, I don't know. Because there's a lot in the center I could try to disrupt. So I guess I kind of have to. And Kellerman, I don't want to throw him in this direction. But I did look up something, and kind of weird, because I've always been curious, can I charge through my units or no, right? I may have cheated a little bit earlier on, I don't know. But just to get the extra hex or whatever, because 5 hexes is hard to do. And I decided to look it up this time. It was hard to find. It's not under charge movement, I think. Oh no, that's exactly where it is. So this tells you, what they pay special for stuff, which is covered in the sheet. But nowhere does it say specifically you can't charge through your own units. It does say a charging cavalry can pass through non-charging friendly cavalry so long as the stacking limit is respected. Which I guess is implying that you can't charge through infantry or even artillery alone. This disturbs me a great deal because infantry lines usually were not solid. And a small cav force could get through. Now, where it couldn't is where you're in fairly close contact with the enemy. And infantry columns almost certainly aren't given the amount of firepower that they provide, it's pretty much assumed that they're not in this game filling the hex. Like, they're not filling the frontage. And artillery almost certainly is not, if that's all you got. Now, okay, if you reach stacking limits, maybe the cav couldn't go through without getting broken up. But if you've got like a battery, which is 2 steps out of 10, it is totally going to provide room. Of course, 2 steps out of 10 is the frontage which you're allowed in this game. You're not allowed to throw in additional infantry fire or anything like that when you have artillery in the front. I'm okay with that because maybe the infantry fire doesn't matter. The artillery fires so high at close range that the infantry fire is just not counted. But again, when you abstract too much away, I start really seeing the system breaking apart in too many ways. Which is why, yes, I can nitpick these things, but I do realize that I'm picking nits. The system as a whole is just not that detailed. It kind of feels like it because it's fire and movement and all that. But it really shows its frayed edges very, very quickly if you start inspecting them at all. Which is why I'm like, okay, I guess I just have to kind of follow the rules because the designer must have something in mind. And unfortunately, I have no idea with this game, but unfortunately, I've seen designers convinced by arguments like this loose one that I'm kind of making on the spur of the moment, where somebody who takes the time to write something up in a playtest or whatever, or even after release, to say this isn't reasonable because of this, and makes a change that's equally unreasonable for other reasons, because the core and the abstraction of the system is such that no matter what, there are going to be places where it doesn't quite work, So like, unless it went into really, really extreme detail as to when you could pass through non-cavalry units. But why? I don't know. I mean, cav are going to be assumed that the cavalry are going to be assumed to be in column formation. But how is that different from infantry that are in column? And what's going on? And there's just so much that doesn't make sense to me in this in this system when you take the magnifying glass to it. Anyway, I was also thinking, and here I'm going completely against that. You know how I like to kind of step away and do less visits on the video, less time spent chattering as the battle goes on. You know, when I first started doing these, not this game, but you know, back when I did 7 days and a few games after that, I did it more like I did when my buddies would come over for role-playing or for a board game or whatever, and I had something set up. I would give them a quick description of what the situation was, and then a week later or 3 days later or whatever our gaming schedule was, they'd get another report, you know? And that's kind of how I saw what I was doing was, oh yeah, you know, give the broad movements, not the details. And honestly, I'm kind of torn with I don't know which is better. I know what I'm doing now feels comfortable and everything to me in the sense that I've got a lot more human contact, human in the sense that I'm talking to a camera. It's the same thing to me, it really is. You know, unless it's like very, very different, right? But like when I go out walking with a friend or something, I more or less talk the same way as I do with the camera, except I'm a little bit more guarded and a little bit less willing to expose myself because, you know, there's a certain level of being forced to be with someone when you've kind of committed to do that. Here, you don't like what I'm saying, whatever, you can turn it off, you can skip ahead, whatever, you know. But there's a certain requirement to be listening or not to say, you know, I don't want to hear this shit from you, dude. You know, whereas on video, the one place where you could actually just jump ahead or whatever, people feel completely fine with, shut the fuck up, asshole. Yeah. And no, I don't delete people's comments or anything like that. I generally will engage them for whatever reason. And there we went off on one of these sidetracks. You know, I'm not just reporting what's happening broadly, and I'm not even going into detail about the game. I'm just babbling on about who knows what. I think I should have, I think YouTube never should have given me more than 15 minutes on a video. That would have helped. Anyway, this is something that wouldn't have happened, is digging into the details of how the system works, going into my personal life, and also, you know, just stepping in the midst of a turn or something rather than giving reports every couple turns of what the broad moves are. Take it how you like. I don't know which is more enjoyable, and I also don't know if I could switch back because, again, this has become comfortable and it's hard to break patterns. Weird recording failure, I don't know if it took or not. There's no easy way to tell what happens with this camera. I'm assuming it partially took. I guess the big thing is that Kellerman is moving over to cover here. If I didn't say that otherwise. Everything else, I did the charge here and got rebuffed. Everything else is pretty much static, so I won't repeat myself. Little notes I want to just call out. One is I started putting a turn number counter here because just to track when the, you know, disorders and whatever are going to be recovered from. I think I did that in some of the other games too. And, well, of course, I'm in the midst of firing, so I mark how far I've gotten with the tweezers for when I have to leave, come back, whatever. even just for a minute or two. I will lose my place otherwise. Even while I'm looking up a combat result, it's useful. But the other thing is, the walls here, we just had a disorder running from those walls, this guy. They don't give a morale bonus in the game. I've decided fire or melee going through them, I'll give a 1-point morale bonus. It's less than what a village would give, but I feel like whatever, they're giving you a defensive bonus. I know the woods do too, but they're more of an iffy thing. These are giving you a defensive bonus, and I'm just like, yeah, let's give that bonus to if you're being fired on and you're within that. Maybe only at range. I'm not sure yet. But you know, making up shit as I go as usual. I think partway through the fire, the map issue is getting me so annoyed that I'm trying to transfer the problem down here where I think less is going to happen. But you can see that's getting pretty bad as I try to increase the space there. Now, some of this may just be cumulative misalignments, but you know, the thing that really shows it to me is this. What he has is smaller borders. He may have cut, he may just be a much more careful person than I am. He may have cut it more carefully. I often have slight misalignments, but not to this degree, of course. You know, it's 10 fucking maps. Where there's more chance. And I've just been, it looks weird because I've been trying to shift everything to try to get this somewhat closer. But it's just not working. I mean, you know, if I level this up and try to pull this down a little bit and whatnot, it's just not working. But I think I can pull this one down more. Of course, then that aligns this wrong. And I'm beginning to think that I'm just not careful enough, that there may be a way to get this all to align right. I don't know. You know, with the level of abstraction, what does it mean when two units are stacked together? Why is the morale check to the top unit, which may or may not be running through you, may just be adjacent to you, why does that incur a morale check on the bottom unit? But something that's adjacent, that may be expressing the exact same thing essentially, because again, I'm looking at this abstraction of, well, units in column, if they're in densely formed sets of columns in sort of a column mass type formation, which isn't expressed in this game, but I've been saying, hey, abstractly, you can look at two units in column and just say it's the units in line, although the top unit is the only one exposed, which doesn't work, but whatever. But that would be the same as, you know, in terms of those units taking hits and dissolving would be the same as units that are adjacent to each other. One of them breaking, which is what I just, one of them just dissolved, in fact, and this thing is not affected by that. Now, that's a really dangerous thing. I've seen games that do collateral morale checks down the line and whatnot, and sometimes they only go one hex away. If that next hex routes, it's no big deal. It opens up a whole new can of worms, but, you know, there's something problematic. Actually, it was a unit here, not here, because this has not yet fired. French cav charge was successful in taking out the gun and then also breaking these units. We had some rallies around the line. I'm a little iffy about Poniatowski rallying French units. Again, you know, he's got a really high value, but any leader will do, you know. And he's got his units in command. Somehow he's managed. He probably knows French, but still, how much should his big morale bonus work on non-polls? I don't know. But then again, Kellerman's in charge of Polish units, so. And yeah, we had a fair number of rallies. The French are doing pretty well at getting things underway. And we flip this sucker over, and that's it for a while, I think. Trying to improve the map situation. I'm convinced this is my fault. I paid a lot of attention to getting the sides lined up, and you know, the top and bottom strayed without an aligned position. It was too easy to fuck up. So I think, you know, the fact that there's these different sized edges and whatnot is really what kind of caused me to be weaker in getting it right. I've been slowly inching it, but you can see I got like this bulge here. Something's wrong, but it's getting better. And I'll be able to improve it, especially as the Austrians under Hesse-Homburg start leaving the area. Now, I'm attempting something that's pretty damn difficult to do, in my opinion. Schwarzenberg is in command. Yeah, I'm not ready to issue an order yet. What I'm trying to do is disengage a little bit to give myself some room to let my units recover whatever. And that's hard. It's always hard to disengage from a combat situation other than, you know, by running away after fire or whatever. And I'm finding I'm having a lot of difficulty here where the Russian core has largely collapsed. In particular, this unit is tricky to get out of here. Now, the French are in kind of a stupid position there. I've unlimbered some artillery to try to convince them to leave. They're in a stupid position because they're surrounded, but they're also causing me problems trying to get out. Eventually, I hope to be able to get out and get those units where they need to be. What do I have under here? I have guns under there that rallied. Screw that, man. Put them on top. And I'll just try to batter the French back. The French over here, under Victor, some of this is under Victor, I think. It's a pain in the butt to figure out whose is whose. Have also been relatively badly used. Poniatowski's holding up. Laurent, you know, I mean, I can't tell who's what anymore, but it looks like his sector is holding up a little better. With the Austrians pulling out of here, Murat ought to perhaps either write an order or run up there to go talk to Aguilar and get him moving. Maybe I'll try an initiative roll, whatever. No matter what, there's going to be at least a one-turn delay. Well, if Aguilar gets initiative, there's a one-turn delay. If Murat wants to do something, there's going to be a two-turn delay to getting those things moving. Because it's pretty clear that the Austrians aren't coming from that direction. This, you know, Pujol is going to cause problems to this extraction, no matter how you write it, and I don't know what to do about that. Yeah. Their orders are still fine to get over to here, but at some point, I'm going to want to fall back behind the Pleiße, and because I've got, my next reinforcements are coming in here at Pegau and I think Altenburg, which may cause a bit of a panic for the French. Somebody gave me, oh, watch out, the Prussians are coming up here, Prussian-Russian Guard. Good shit, but that's tomorrow. I definitely don't want to get completely caught off guard, though. Napoleon was relatively aware of where forces were, I'm assuming. He's just horribly outnumbered. That's the real problem on this field. Not yet, but for the whole battle. Oh, chatter, chatter, chatter. Up with Aguilera firing off an initiative check. There's pretty much no penalty for him. The game assesses like a -2 morale penalty for this turn, but he's not involved in anything, so it's safe to try as long as you're not, in a situation where you're actually fighting, and that makes sense. I like the penalty here. I prefer the failure loose cannon type rules in the Essig games more, just because that's craziness, man. But this seems like a reasonable penalty in the sense that the leader is not happy in this situation and is probably issuing confused orders or something along that line, which will cause more problems in a failure for the initiative. Even in a success, it might cause issues, but you don't want to really penalize someone for seizing the opportunity that is correct. So let's start with the French here on, what is this, 11:30? Got a while before the young guard comes in. They're coming in at 2 p.m. Noticing, here I go blathering again. It's a lot harder in this game, maybe because of the space, maybe because of the quantity of cav that the coalition has comparatively. It seems a lot harder, though, to defend your infantry and screen them with the cav. I've got charges available to me that are going to, well, actually here I can't enter this hex, so that gives me some protection. Interesting. So Marat's gonna go have a talk with Aguilera, get him moving. One charge there. This is tiring Pujol out, and Kellerman moving up to threaten the lead of that Austrian column. Otherwise, sort of filling in the line, and it really looks like the French are winning, at least throughout against Wittgenstein. The Prussians, they're still holding pretty solid, but we'll see after the firepower. They've been taking some hits, etc. All right. Against the artillery, somewhat successful. They disordered them. Didn't cause casualties, which is what I was really hoping for. Ran them off. Well, there'll be a harder job to get them somewhere. Especially since the Corps is moving this way and they're heading that way, and that's not good. Let's see. A lot of the French rallied. You can see a lot of the. It's a little confusing because there's commanders sitting with numbers on top of them. That's the fatigue number. It takes some of the intrinsic sort of easy to understand how bad are you doing situation out of the line. And then I got things like this where I'm confusing matters with two units with the same turn of disorder on them, which serves no purpose. It makes it look like there's a commander there who's fatigued, and there's not. And that Russian center has just collapsed pretty much. I need to get some orders placed, but I also need these guys to get back, and I feel like I'm providing some sort of cover. The French aren't advancing vigorously. Victor had taken some hits, but now he's kind of recovered, and I think he can put some real pressure on that collapsed center. He's still got a little bit here on the flank. Still got some Cossacks and whatnot kicking around, but not really enough to prevent the attacks from happening. And for the kill pile, see a fair number of coalition forces just dead, whereas just a couple of French units that have been completely dissolved. Nothing's left the map yet. So I haven't figured out how I'm going to cope with that. To add the lower demoralization factors in, I looked at the rules for the modern set, and for Wittgenstein, they come in at 45 instead of 66. That seems about right. 66 is actually pretty high. There's like 90 steps or something, and it comes at half the step loss. So we're actually not too far from that. We're right in the low 40s, and again, actually we may be higher than that because it includes disordered units. So I have to look at them, which means we may actually be facing that effect. And it would definitely make sense. Here's the problem I have with it. Again, that's sort of a one-day battle thing. It makes sense in a one-day battle. In something of this size, I'm not really sure that it shouldn't be recalculated at the end of each, at the beginning of a new day. That's not to say the break levels should be recalculated. I think those should stay the same. But what I mean is that there's a possibility that you falter, you recover, and you won't have to face that first level again on the one day, but maybe you should have to face it again on another day. But also, your morale is more used to the lowered values. I probably will not go to that level. I think the idea of just 2 steps and, the unit's been badly used over the course of a week or whatever is good enough. And then finally, the unit is so broken that it can barely stand. That you can only really use it for garrison duties and such. And I don't expect it to be able to hold ground, and certainly not to take offensive actions. So yeah, I'll recalculate and see what we're looking at there. And once we reach a level, I've got to mark it because there's an immediate effect when the level is reached, where the units begin to, where they have a single sort of point of failure, where all the units that are still in good morale might just fall back. And, well, we may have hit that. See some differences between the two rules beyond the adding the demoralization threshold and then the desperation being something separate. What is missing, or what exists here, and this explains why it's destroyed as opposed to something else. A disorganized and demoralized unit that suffers another disorganization result is no longer totally eliminated, but for victory purposes, it gets the victory points as if it were destroyed. Mark the unit on the army sheet and add a second demoralization marker. That sounds like rout. The unit retreats, as with its full movement allowance. It does not stop upon entering a town hex or a wood hex. If the movement's not possible, this is eliminated. I'm wondering if the rout rule is in here at all. Yeah, the rout rule is actually still present. I think the answer is simply once it reaches, it will rout. Now, I counted the losses, including the disordered units, and we got over the 65 point, which means that Wittgenstein's corps is fully demoralized. It might recover. The original rules only cover losses, not disordered units. So I'm applying the level 2 that this qualifies for, and oops, I made the level 1 without noticing. Well, they stood stout, man. I'm applying the level 2 that they wouldn't qualify for, but I'm not going to apply the permanent rout issue until they've taken enough casualties to put them over the limit. Just reconciling the two versions of the rules, because victory conditions, etc., are based on them hitting those casualty levels. For what, though, is the big question, You cannot destroy every corps in the French army because the old guard is only destroyed under these rules, it cannot rout, and we're taking, or it can't rout, but it can't be affected by, I thought this was a cat. It's not affected by the army morale rules at all. And if my reading is that that's what they mean by destroy and nothing else comes close to defining that, well, gosh, man. You have to find and hunt down the old guard to win the battle as the coalition, and that does not feel appropriate. Not only them, but also the guard cavalry. So that leads me to what determines that an army has broken? Army morale is actually not taken into account in this scenario, or in this series, not this series, but in this particular game box, all the scenarios. Instead, it's all done at corps level demoralization, which means that maybe that's not what they mean by destroy, but if it is, and maybe I can just tell by looking at the game, right? But if it is, it's going to be either some proportion of the corps that are damaged or knocked out of commission, or it's just take the total strength. Basically, add all the losses for all the corps, maybe with all the losses for the old guard and guard cavalry, and just say, well, if you hit that total amount, you win. You've destroyed the enemy army. I don't know. It's going to be fuzzy, whatever it is. I hope we can just see who wins, because the victory conditions are not some kind of point salad where, it's like, well, this town's worth this and this is worth that, which is fine, but it does make it more painful to see what's going on if there's points all over the place and stuff. All right. I think this is the only one that's hit that badly. Now, with the fact that I broke over there, I'm kind of curious, well, what about Clenau? But Clenau's taken almost no damage. He's got a fair amount of disrupted units. And Victor, who's actually probably the next most hit, I don't know how many, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 19 hits out of 44, but then I gotta hunt down his units, and it's hard to tell units here to see if they're disrupted. And gosh, it's pretty easy with the coalition because each of the corps is a different color right now. That's not going to always be the case. But yeah, so like this is 108. Well, 108 is Lauriston. Looks like he's Victor, but no. Make it just easy on myself. It will just be casualties. I will not use the modern rules set, which involves counting all the disordered units and such not. It's not as appealing, not as accurate, perhaps, but yeah, I think it's good enough. Routed units, I'm kind of like, well, they really should be included in there. Disorder, I'm not so sure, because they're just really, yes, they're not in really good fighting formation, and they're falling back and whatever, but they're also not routing. To me, there's a big difference between routing and not routing. Anyway, what that means is the Russians are going to be at step 1, not step 2. I still have to make a check for them. A couple of units had to make checks. Only one was affected, this artillery, and I'll be able to get that out of there with some fire on it and might end up routing. So that was that. Now it's time to look at the charges, and when light gets worse, I'll probably start calculating those values for all the others, because it is a big thing that I fired it off. We've got the repositioning. Prussians pretty much holding the same line. Russians falling back a little bit to try to cover and unlimbering some guns that have recovered or whatever. you know, make that ground hard to cross. We're getting closer to sort of connecting up. This is still vulnerable. Now more to Kellerman, but the Cav are just going to harass it. And there's not much I can do about it. This time, though, I did place a couple of Cav units to give it better coverage. This guy isn't terribly useful, though, so they can just charge right into there. And I couldn't go up over this hill without possibly getting countercharged. I don't know how much that mattered, but I shied away from it, probably to my detriment. Just making sure that that's French and not a coalition unit. I got a few units stuck over here, some routing, and then these guys here routed off the board. I'm marking where they went off. I don't know if that's enough. I may mark down the turn they left the board too, because what I'm thinking is overnight is what basically cures you, but I may make it so that like you have to spend at least 12 hours off the board, you know, so that you'll come in later. You won't just route late in the evening and come right back on the board like I did with Hanau, I think it was. But on the other hand, maybe I don't really care, so I'm not sure. Maybe just the next morning they show up. You know, they're not going to rally without a night's sleep, and if they get a night's sleep, they're off the board. They're fine. Maybe. You know, sounds not unreasonable. It's just sort of I don't know if they should all be showing up first thing in the morning. All these shattered units. That's going to feel a little funky. All right, time to shoot. And a quick glimpse, end of turn, and I don't think I want to do another. It's like 5 o'clock now. I gotta leave here around 7, maybe before that, for a 9 o'clock show. To give me time to stretch and everything. I could probably squeeze in another half turn. There's still daylight, which is the reason. But anyway, you know, we're seeing the morale not really improving. Although some guns up here recovered, for what that's worth. I don't know. There's no rules for transfer between roads or anything like that. That's what he'd really like to do. Forest, I think, is not, yeah, it's not even allowed for the artillery. So I kind of have no way to sneak him through except by going around on the roads. I may just consider him, I may pull him off the map and consider him routed away unless something weird happens, because I do not see a way to make use of him. And this other guy here, he's probably just going to get run down. So, Cav charges. Pujol is taking one of the one light Cav, which is really the only thing that's effective on counter charges. Out of contention, it hit it without it being able to roll a counter charge. So, the other one came back here, created a couple of squares. Then Kellerman threw a couple of units in, and 2 of the Austrians made square, but one of them did not, so that's getting hit. Strangely, leaders cannot be killed by Cav charges, only by fire combat, at least under the new rules. I don't know if that's the case in the old ones, but it does kind of seem weird to me. Murat gave Augural his orders and moved to a more centralized location where he can maybe help rally some stuff. French army is actually in pretty good shape right now. Swinging around on the Russians, Laurent coming in to try to keep the Russian and Austrian forces from connecting, I guess. Those are his orders. So, Pujol and Kellerman continuing harassment of the Austrians. Napoleon getting closer to try to rally the fleeing forces. And Marmont continuing his long hike. Now it's firing time. I think we'll just do the half turn. It's starting to get dark, and these take a lot out of me. It doesn't move things a whole hell of a lot, but these cav charges did some damage to the Austrians. Not so much here. It just kind of bounced. You don't have a locked in melee type of situation, which feels a little weird, but okay. There's a lot that feels weird. But Kellerman's force plowed into 2 units, sent one routing, hit this other one, and sent it. And you know what? I forgot the route. I forgot to route him as far as he should have gone. He went 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And did some damage. He took a little bit too. But that's likely to get lit up where it is. The only problem is it's disrupted. Remember, you know, when you get behind somebody, unless they have a second line or something, they gotta make some pretty ugly decisions as to what to do. And maybe the best thing to do is to just charge them, see if they countercharge. If we break them and send them flying back, they're gonna go someplace stupid and get shot up and whatnot. And maybe that's the best that can happen. The other option, of course, is I do have units for a second line. I could bring stuff up. Got cannons I could just unlimber behind them and fire. This is not a good position for those units, but it was just too tempting to keep slamming through. Anyway, all we got left is the rally phase, and I don't think, I'm not gonna come back for a video for that unless something exceedingly exciting happens, because I think it was only halfway through a turn after all. I didn't do any cav charges. Is there a reason? Yeah, I don't think they really help me right now. Gotta get this guy up this hill. I think that's a better position. Schwarzenberg gave Wittgenstein orders to withdraw. They're not implemented yet. Doing what I can to destroy that cav, make it pay a price for what it did. It could blow, but under all conditions, it was like going to be facing all this fire. So there's not a lot that can be done about it. At least that I can think of. Sometimes the rules has mechanisms that, you know, with this game, there probably isn't. But with a lot of games, there might have been some kind of mechanism to get them out of there easier. And Prussians still pretty much standing where they are. They're going to take up some of the slack. They may move a few more. They're going to have to take up some of the slack of the that the Russians, when they withdraw, undergo. Although I can probably fall back without terribly disregarding my orders. Turn 8, we can see Victor and Poniatowski still paying a price for this sort of semi-aggressive stance. I mean, they're really not advancing there. The problem is Poniatowski can't go into these villages. They're nasty to fight in. I just am not big enough, although I might be able to take this one. But I've cleared, you know, a couple of units. On the other hand, a couple of mine are running, well, one is running this turn. But here, the farm has been cleared out. We can see units there. Yeah, Victor is the one who's really not engaging heavily enough. Now, Laurent and Victor combined kind of drove the mass of Wittgenstein's force away. The rest of it that's sort of associated here, heavy artillery and everything, there really wasn't a heavy push there, and numerically, I don't know, it looks to me like the coalition had more artillery on this side, which is what's winning it. It's just, the game is an artillery duel at this point, and that's more because I'm probably too afraid to charge forward in melee. I'm just, I'm unwilling to take the risk there. Yeah. Anyway, ready for the next turn. The way I sound, it's because this is still fairly early. I haven't taken my bath and whatnot and recharged after dancing, and I'm not in great shape ever at this point. Usually I don't play anything, but because of the daylight issues surrounding this game, I wanted to get a little bit in. As I start turn 8, I've got a lot of cav charges, and I started doing them, reaction charges and whatnot, against this Austrian column. Oh boy, you know, between the lighting and how I feel, you know, I feel okay, I thought, but the bending and everything and thinking is just a little bit harder than it is normally, keeping stuff in my head. You know, and I didn't really realize that would be the case. And I almost feel like I'm going to try to push through this turn, but man, because it's horrible to stop, you know, just as you start a turn. Certainly have to get through the cav charge, and that's going to be the hardest part of it. But it is, you know, it's always probably, a large amount of cav charges or whatever is getting to be about at my limit. And it's one of the things that keeps me away from the Napoleonic and some of the other eras where combined arms is an important factor, and you have to handle this part right. This game does it about as light as you can. Not quite. I've done some minis that are lighter. But it's just the burden of the mechanical play, both mental and physical even, especially with these counters that you have to keep looking at to get the number right. Speaking of which, I found that one of my units that's here, Jesus, is this it? Number 218, kind of a yellowish colored thing that I had with, associated with Peugeot, is actually attached to Latour Marburg. I probably switched units somehow. I don't know, you know, there's probably like 248. No, that's not going to be it. Yeah, I don't know how I possibly could have gotten that kind of numbering wrong. But anyway, it's there on the field, and that's how I'm playing it. I don't know what'll happen. Because I had already started the counter charge and everything, and it was just too ugly to switch things around. But the Austrians appear to be a danger to this French artillery, so I kind of got to get them out of there. You need a break after moving everything. Hey, the charge even isn't enough. Now, the next part involves looking at lots of numbers, so it's not going to be great. A little bit more pressure from Poniatowski. Victor throwing the pressure on a lot harder. Didn't quite go to the charge level. I see the Russians routing. I want to finish them off and get in, start hitting the Prussians. And we've got a couple of people, Victor and Pujol, who are both fatigued to the point of penalty. I'm fatigued to the point of penalty. And Laurent pushing between the gap, this gap, which has opened up completely, but there's still a couple of cannons here. I want to spook them off. I don't want to push too hard. I don't want to fatigue him more. What I really want to do is get a chance to rest. Me and Murat. But it's hard to do because you've got a little bit of an advantage. You want to keep pressing it, but doing so just keeps fatiguing your troops, and the pressure becomes less effective then. As you can see, a bunch of disordered units. Napoleon trying to catch some of these routed guys, and I think it's Marmont coming in slowly. All right, we take break maybe for the rest of the night. Damn. Right, well, I did manage to get through the French half of the turn. And what do we got going on? The change. The cav attacks charges were successful. Otherwise, you know, we're breaking the Prussians up a little bit here, but we're taking hits too, so. You know, I'm seeing part of the expense of the game is all the cross-reference. First of all, not being able to read the counters very well in this light means I have to pick up every counter and bring it to my eyes. Then I have to cross it here. And sometimes, so I don't have to do that with firepower, except with artillery. I have to look up the artillery to see if it's half strength or not. But on melee, I might have to do it twice. Once to calculate the odds. And this is the thing. With firepower, I might have to look up the artillery, and then if I get a hit, I have to look up the unit. With melee, I have to do it potentially twice for each unit. I have to calculate the odds, and that requires a lookup in each case because any casualties affect that. They don't affect firepower for reasons that of the abstraction. But then any hits, and often there are multiple I have to check. One thing I don't do is I don't cross-reference to see, hey, is the unit got a penalty on it for its morale? Simply because it's easier not to, and it's just like there's enough abstraction going on in the game anyway that if I'm not taking a casualty, I'm just not going to check to see if the unit's been degraded that far. But boy, I don't know if I could even make it through this with all of the effort the game requires. The littler ones aren't as bad in terms of that, but I'm just finding this really, really hard. And some of it's my eyes going worse, some of it's the lighting here being worse, especially at night. But you know, to have a monster, something that affects your life this heavily, set up and not be able to move through it at the pace that I would normally go. This is not the time to make this kind of decision because, you know, some of it is my body hurts, so bending over is painful and everything just because of dancing. We'll see if the energy can keep me through, but realize, you know, this is just the beginning. The battle's small right now, you know. There's a whole bunch of shit coming on. I got maybe a quarter of the forces on the board. Smaller, a quarter of the French. Let's say an eighth of the coalition, you know. And it's just nightmarishly painful. But on the other hand, you know, why did I buy this if I'm not going to play it? Obviously, I meant to play it, but I don't want to make myself completely miserable doing so. All right, tomorrow I should be able to do the Austrian side and some more. As I push myself into the Austrian side of the 12:30 turn, Schwarzenberg giving some orders over here to Klenau. I launched a cav charge and it failed. You can see they're disordered now against them. I don't know, I might have another charge over here to help cover the Russian withdrawal. But I did look something up because I noticed something that kind of disturbed me. And I knew it was the case. Like on Kellerman's back, he has command numbers. So I looked up what the rule is on this cavalry not having to follow orders. Well, it's not, So the way the game works is weird, because the way the command rules work is that they kind of say anything that's not sort of explicitly withdrawn exists on all the higher levels. So command radius and stuff like that exist at the lower levels and at the higher levels, so they don't have to repeat them. On the level 4 orders, third level orders, there's a special rule for Cav Core. They're autonomous. It can switch from an attack to a march order at any time. And these are special cases that aren't actually under Cav Core. Okay. All right. That's where I got that idea. This is not repeated, obviously, in the written orders, and it's not really clear that it should have been withdrawn, in any sense, other than the fact that they're given numbers. Cav commands have essentially a freedom. If you look at like Kellerman, he's got a rating of 5 for accepting orders and a rating of 5 for initiative, which, yes, there's some penalty for undertaking initiative, but it means he can kind of write his own orders. But there's a turn delay in terms of that, which is completely different from this sort of real flexibility that I feel Cav need to have. I think some sort of hybrid is appropriate, which is to say, see, here's the problem. If you write orders for Cav units, first of all, you're going to spend a lot of time writing the orders and checking them and making sure that you're equivalent to them. There's the time delay, which, if you wanted this to be the most precise that you possibly can, I would say take the time delay away from Cav, at the very least. That they're just more capable of executing their orders once they decide upon them. And in general, there'd be almost no reason to write orders to Cav units. They would simply roll and undertake their new orders. Now, the truth is, I kind of know what my orders are. And the thing is, Cav orders, when I did write them, I wrote them for other games in this series before I ran across that in, this last iteration of games I've been playing. They tend to have orders like, kind of support the left flank or support the advance of, just things like that, where it's pretty damn vague what they're doing, So their orders tend to have a wide amount of latitude. I think this is up here. Got booted by the bulge. Anyway, that's just one of those things that I've kind of abstracted away Cav orders entirely, because there's support for it in the rules. Honestly, I didn't realize all the considerations in play when I read the rules. I just remembered Cav are exempt. Okay, that's fair. Life has made its way into the map. And at the end of the Austrian turn, our little buddy has moved along. I don't know where the hell he went. He was heading up that way. A lot safer for him up there. I don't think he'll find many other bugs, though. Prussian flank beginning to collapse. Poniatowski, though, is in bad shape. He's, not close to being wrecked in any sense, but he's taken a lot of losses in this fight so far. Now, this is exceedingly more violent than the same turn was. We're basically playing a what-if scenario here, which is Murat did not have or did not follow the orders he had from Napoleon not to engage. Something I didn't realize because it's not baked into the grand campaign. It is present in the scenario for this day. and is mentioned there, but there's no mention and there's no no discussion of the overall. So that's not entirely correct. There is a discussion of what happened historically, but it's basically the setup for the battle. A little bit, this is all that's covered in the actual battle, is like 3 short paragraphs. No real description of what happened, etc. Just sort of how it started and what the end result was. Which, I mean, I'm okay, but I ended up without the insight to go look for, hey, did I want to play something more historical? And I'm okay. Same forces, same battlefield, same setup. Murat's a little bit more aggressive. I live with that. I will expect different results from this. Not, hey, Napoleon's going to win, but rather the fact that Murat was not on the offensive when he had the advantage early on, and more importantly, as more and more troops come in, I'll be able to press that advantage more. Now, there's problems with that, though. There's not a lot of map down here. It could well be the entire army of Bohemia. I think that's what we've got on the board right now. As it were, has to withdraw and then comes back in as a reinforcement or something. That's going to change the world significantly. The French can't press the attack too much. Tomorrow, what is it? More troops start coming in from here. And, you know, you don't want to be cut off from your supply line. Although there's a lot of room to fall back up there. For the Austrian part, Klenau's corps, starting to make its way where it's supposed to go. Aguilar hasn't caught up with them. Those units, a couple of artillery up there have rallied, but they can't rejoin because of the forest, so they may have to leave the map. And trying to think what else. Russians trying to form their defensive position here. Schwarzenberg has failed to make it to where he's supposed to go. He gave orders to Wittgenstein this turn, right? No, Wittgenstein already had orders. I shouldn't have been with him. But I couldn't get to Kleist, I think it is. Such a big unit. Yeah. I couldn't get to Kleist, so it's not terrible that I'm where I am. That was about 10 hexes from where he was. But I got to get some orders to Kleist. I'm okay waiting a little bit because he's holding out pretty well, but he is getting hurt. I haven't decided yet if I want to pull across the Pleiße or make it a slight attempt to defend this last town here. I think I'm probably best off just falling back across the Pleiße. That's the end of this video. Next one, we'll start a little later today, but there's some things I got to do.